Disregard females and acquire currency.
I'm white, and I've got everything I need. No one clutches their purses when they're in a room alone with me. And I can drive for any neighborhood I please at any hour, and the police don't do a thing. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got everything I need. I'm a guy getting paid more than a girl with a degree. And I can walk down the streets after dark, no one wants to rape me. And I can get a girl pregnant and just as easily flee. Just like my straight white male dad did to me. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. I've got a pile of broken mirrors and I'm walking under ladders and I'm spilling tons of salt, but to me that doesn't matter, cause my skin and my gender and my orientation are the best things to have if you live in this nation. I recommend it highly. If I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. Shit's gonna work out for me, cause I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Intellectual Dollar Tree. We do this show live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific right here on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/Echoplex Media. I'm flying solo tonight, homo alono, as we say. HK is out on adventures. You can find me on Twitter. Go find me on Twitter. I don't know. I don't even remember my @name on there. You can support this project at eplex.store via the merch or memberships or at patreon.com/Echoplex. And of course, if you don't have any money to spend or don't want to give me any money but still want to support this project, you can always tell a friend about this show, but they might hate you for that. So I had a couple things I wanted to go over tonight, but I thought this one was going to be the most fun. This is this Tom Bilyeu guy. I haven't done too much on him in the past, but this one is about population collapse, how modern life is making men and women infertile, and the guest is a lady named Shauna Swan. I've never heard of her, so I think we'll be kind of flying blind here, but this content is kind of right up our alley. So without any further ado, here is population collapse.
What you talk about in the book is that we actually meet the criteria for being an endangered species, right, which is freaky. And I think anybody listening to this is going to call BS right now because they're like, there's 8 billion of us. There's no way that we meet that. But so one, is that a fair assessment? Are the stakes really that high? And how on earth do we meet the qualifications for an endangered species?
There's definitely a problem with reproductive health. And by the way, it's not just fertility. Fertility is one manifestation of it. There's many others. We'll talk about those. But fertility is a good one to start because that's something that involves the man and the woman. So on the man side, we have declining sperm count, which we've documented most recently in November, showing it's worse than we thought. And
before it was 1.16%. It's now over 2.5%.
Over 2 point something,
That still means that there's still like 97.5% as much sperm as there was at another time when they did a similar study. I'm not even sure that's statistically significant.
I think it was like 2.64 or something. I mean, it was crazy.
It's crazy. And that's in a relatively short time. So
but is that statistically significant? I have a hard time believing that's statistically significant.
Saying back there in 2017 with this decline of 1% per year was an underestimate of the rate of decline. And
is that per year? No, come on.
Quote, Western countries, we know that it's all over the world. So it's actually bleaker than when we wrote Countdown, or bleaker than when
Wonderful.
we published that paper. And it's
Yeah, somebody in chat, like we don't usually, this is a live show, but there's a podcast. But somebody in chat actually asked, could this be because we have an aging population, people are living longer? It's like how cancer rates are going up. Some of it might be environmental, but some of it is just because people are less likely to die of other causes. So yeah, if the population's aging, the average sperm count is going to go down. That's why that's why there's a chat here. Oftentimes they're smarter than I am. But that's what I'm saying is that number is this 1 to 2.5% number. I have a hard time believing it's statistically significant.
I don't want to leave out the female side of this, right? So we have more, the rate of miscarriage is going up, and the rate of PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, is going up. Of course, women's infertility is part of couple infertility. So it's kind of a bleak picture. But the interesting thing to me is that the rate of change, the rate of decline, the rate of problems is all about the same. It's something over 1% per year. So, many people think, well, 1%, that's not so bad. 1%.
I thought the rate of decline doubled. One of the questions I was going to ask you.
That was sperm count. But I'm putting this in a bigger context. Reproductive function, including all of those reproductive outcomes.
And you don't think we're going to start to see that number? I don't see how men's fertility could be going, or the sperm count could be diving at 2.5% more than 2.5%.
Yeah. Calling 2.5% a dive that's a choice. This is crazy. I can already tell this is going to be fucking crazy.
Right.
Year over year.
Yeah.
And this not become a larger fertility problem where we break that 1%. Do you think I'm crazy on that?
That's likely, but I'm cautious. I'm actually
optimistic. Is that what you mean?
No, it doesn't mean I'm optimistic. It means that before I say that everything is worse, I have to go into each of those trends and look at them individually. But I did that for fertility, for PCOS, for miscarriage, for testosterone. By the way, that's a really big one we should talk about.
But testosterone testosterone is not correlated with fertility.
All declining at least 1% per year. And that I can safely...
Year over year. I mean, that compounds.
So...
No. It does. When it's 1%, it does the opposite of compounding.
People 1% per year, they go, yeah, that's a lot. Then I say 50 years. That's how far back we've looked. That's 50%.
Yeah,
that's
least. Not how that works.
And they still don't get it. And I say, well, suppose it was IQ. Suppose I told you that IQ had dropped 50%.
But I don't care about the results of IQ tests. Yeah, this one's going to be wild, everybody. I'm probably going to fucking throw shit during this. If like you see the camera like and the stream ends, it's because I threw something at the fucking camera.
I mean, that would be...
I'm already scandalized though that people aren't, their eyebrows reaching the back of their head when they hear the stat that we've dropped 50% since we started recording this. That's pretty startling. And so to orient people a little bit, so I'm a bit of a Japanophile. I'm absolutely obsessed with Tokyo. It's my favorite place on earth.
Oh, this guy. Oh, you don't say. You don't. I'm surprised. And it's fine to be interested in like Japanese culture and other cultures and stuff, but I don't think that's what this is about.
And when I think about what's happening there, where you have a sexless, it's not completely sexless, but it's like where they're trying to incentivize young people to actually have sex. Like that's so absurd to me growing up in the 80s where it was like everyone was telling you not to have sex. Oh my God, like I was telling you before we started rolling, my whole life has been about a level of paranoia. I have been terrified my entire life that I would get somebody pregnant that I didn't want to get pregnant.
Yeah.
And so now to think that governments are having to get involved to get people to have sex seems crazy, but is true. The data reflects it. And so as we establish the severity of the problem, give me an anchor around I've always said the human body is a chemical processing plant. And I get some side eye from people when they hear me say that, because I'm often saying it in a religious context of why I believe the way that I believe. Help me understand though, because this does the warning that comes out loud and clear in your book is tied to the fact that we are now processing through our bodies chemicals that we shouldn't be processing.
I love that. I think that's a really great way to put it. I think the body is much more than a chemical processing plant, and I'm sure you do too.
I
But-
don't know that I do. I won't.
Yeah, I might actually agree with him that your body is basically a bunch of chemical processes, but that's like an obvious thing. Since everything's made of chemicals, and everything that is like has some kind of change going on or has some kind of system going on it's going to involve chemical reactions.
On that, we can get into that later.
Okay. So, but let's go back to Japan. And by the way,
Japan's big problem is that they are anti-immigrant there. That's their big problem. They need to start letting fucking people into Japan is what they need to do.
East Asia. South Korea is actually, I think, the lowest. And what I look at is the total fertility rate. So the total fertility rate is the number of children that a woman or couple will have in their lifetime. Okay? And in 1960, it was 5.4 worldwide.
But was that per couple, or she's like a woman or couple? And it's God, and is that like people who are coupled and have children, or is that adjusted for single people that don't have any children? Like, what does that number mean? Like,
and that dropped to 2.6
and this is number of kids that people will have.
Number of kids, and that includes everywhere. You know, from Japan to sub-Saharan Africa, which has very high fertility. But
it's not. They're like conflating. This is stupid. The conflation of the rate of reproduction, like of actual reproduction, with like a person's like physical fertility. Those aren't the same thing. Like gay people we're not infertile because we're gay. We're just gay.
Dropped in 50% in 50 years, basically. Same as sperm count. Is that an accident? I don't think so.
But when you say it's dropping 1%, okay, so I hate to do all kinds of math with you, right? So let's drop 10% every time. So you start with 100. You drop 10% off of that. Now you're at 90%. You drop 10% of that. Now you're at 81%. You drop 10% off of that. Now I'm going to have to start doing math. You're pulling 8.1% off of 81. So you're at like 70, 73, 72.9, something like that. And then you pull 10% off of that. So dropping 1%, 50 years in a row, you don't actually lose 50% because you're taking 1% of a lower number every year.
So where are we? 2.1, 2 children per couple, and a little more because there are some losses, right? So 2.1, the species replaces itself.
Globally, that's the average we have to maintain.
Right. And in countries that are below that, and I think South Korea is now at 0.89.
Whoa.
And Japan is, I think, just about 1. Haven't looked. These change quite rapidly.
Okay, hold on. That's per couple?
Yeah.
So you have
again. I have to. Is this like the population divided by 2, and then divided by the number of babies, or are they like getting actual numbers of active couples who are fucking? Like, I don't know, like, they're not explaining this. That the point of this isn't to inform, right? The point of this is going to end up with some weird eugenic shit, right? This has to go into some fucking weird eugenics place.
Couples in Japan that every time they get together, basically you now have the population because they're only going to replace, there's 2 of them replacing with 1.
Right.
And in South Korea, it's less than 1.
Yes.
Those are terrifying numbers. Like, to give people an understanding, that is guaranteed economic collapse.
Yes.
Unless you have migrants come in. But
Yes.
the problem is, if this is a global trend, there's nowhere to grab migrants from. Wherever you...
Yeah, nobody wants to... Yeah, there's no migrants anywhere, you dumb fuck. She just said that there was a place. She just mentioned sub-Saharan Africa, which also dog whistle. Anytime anybody brings up sub-Saharan Africa and birth rate, you're like, uh-oh. I'm getting pretty close to that great replacement sun here, aren't we? Flying awful close to that. Yeah, there are, but the fucking Japan, like specifically and notoriously, is like a pretty racist country. There's not a lot of immigration going to Japan.
Then they're going to be the ones that collapse.
Right.
I just want to say that again. This is a guaranteed population collapse.
Yes.
It's not a maybe population collapse. Wow. Okay.
Right. And so just, you said this was economic catastrophe. Let me point out, and I'm sure you know this, about the pyramid, population pyramid, right? So everybody knows the pyramid, and the top of it is old people, and the bottom of it is young people. And this is the way it was in 1960, right? And gradually what's happened is that this part has grown and this part has shrunk.
Old people are living longer and we're having fewer kids. You get top heavy real fast.
Exactly. And the people in the middle take care of those people and those people. We don't have enough of them. And so that means that all of our economic support, which is funded by the middle, is in trouble, right? Social Security, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So
Social Security is not in trouble. They always tell this lie. I'm going to get this wrong, I think. But I think by 2040, if we don't change anything, the projection is that Social Security will pay out like 80% of benefits. But if we were to raise the cap and capture more of rich people's income with Social Security, we would still be able to pay out 100% of benefits. The problem with Social Security is the cap. That the cap hasn't been going up with inflation and with income, especially at the top.
You know, there are books written about this, of course, and there's still people that say 8 billion people in the world, we're, plenty of people, too many people. But if you look into this deeper and look at these trends and you see where this is going, everyone is knowledgeable. Everyone, I believe, is saying this will not continue. It will reach a maximum exactly when, 2050, we are not sure exactly when, and then it will go down and it will never come back. That's a quote from Empty Planet, which is an excellent book. I recommend.
Empty Planet, which is an excellent book. She said everyone she knows who is smart or intelligent, and then she's like, here's a book called Empty Planet that I'm going to quote from. What the fuck?
Daryl Bricker.
For those that don't want to sleep at night. If you want to wake up screaming in the morning, read Lonely Planet.
It's a scary prospect.
Empty Planet or Lonely Planet?
Empty, yeah. And
no, Lonely Planet is this guy's audience.
So one of the reasons is, and now we're going to go away from chemicals. Okay.
Well, first let's anchor people around phthalates. Phthalates. It's phthalates, I think. PHTH. ALATS or something.
Yes, yeah.
So phthalates.
Yeah.
You're getting them all the time in stuff.
Yeah, but I'm glad that you're bringing up phthalates, and that's really important, and it's where I live because I've done so much work on it. But I don't want to limit our discussion. That's one of a class of chemicals inside a bigger class called endocrine disrupting chemicals or hormonally active chemicals. Those are chemicals that confuse our body as to the function and the amount and the transport of basic hormones, right, that we need. Okay. But I'd like to not leave the problem of population overload or underload without saying that one of the things or major thing that drives populations down is something that I'm very much in favor of. And that's women's education, contraception, urbanization. All of these things get women to say, no, I don't want to have 6 kids anymore. I want to join the workforce. I want to make.
Wait, how many kids do you think this lady has?
Kind of contribution. Okay. And it's that growth that's causing these demographers to say we will never go back up to 6 children per. You see, in order to have things balance out, if somebody's having 1 or 2 children, somebody else is going to have 6 children. And as these countries, which are poorer countries, less educated countries, become more educated have women entering the workforce and so on, the women are not going to produce children in those large numbers. And that's driving the certainty that we won't go back up. And that's the question. Yes, we're going down. We can see that. World Bank, you can look at.
But wait, we're not going. Isn't the population continuing to go up? Oh. It's not going up in the right places.
Your listeners can look at World Bank fertility data, open access, look at it. You can see exactly how many children were born per country per year, and convince yourself, because you can see those declines. And you don't, it's not going to go back up. So that's the lifestyle part of it. The chemical part is where I hope we'll spend most of our time, because that's what I work on.
Walk us through, how are these chemicals getting into our system? Because modern life is pretty amazing, but it's got a pretty high price.
Yes. They get into our system every way possible, right? So what are those? Ingestion, drink, and food is a really big one. Inhalation.
No, just don't breathe. It'll be fine.
Hairspray, nail polish, air pollution. They get into our bodies through our skin. So chemicals in personal care products and makeup, just absorbing as we walk through the day in through our skin, all of those contribute. And different ones enter in different ways, depending on where they're most prevalent, right? But you said talk about phthalates. So I'll start there. Phthalates, which is a terrible name, isn't it? We should call them, I don't know what. Anyway, phthalates are chemicals that we primarily think of as plasticizers. They make plastic soft and flexible, which is wonderful. Wonderful uses of we need that for many things. Think about the tubes in a nursery for premature babies. They're getting a lot of phthalates.
What?
Because they're getting tubes into their body that's carrying nutrients, oxygen, and because phthalates are not chemically bound to the plastic, they come out particularly in warm media, and they get into that food.
Oh, this is that shit about the fucking, they were talking that shit about the Capri Sun and the fucking high C, the juice boxes and shit. This is that juice box shit. I'm not kidding. This is that juice box shit.
Whatever's going into the baby. And measurably, you can then measure it in the urine. Okay, so there's no question about that. There was a very nice experiment in Eastern Europe. Very simple. A farm. Farmer milked a cow by hand. Farmer milked the cow with a milking machine. Soft tubing, phthalates in the milking machine milk, no phthalates in the hand milking milk. Right? So, I mean, there's no question that the processing of food, that's just one example of food processing. The processing of food introduces phthalates into the food, as does the packaging, as does the preparation. For example, microwaving in plastic. You know that's a no-no, right?
Yeah, thankfully that one I've heard about a long time ago. In fact, that begs the question, how do we start learning about this? How did we detect that phthalates or anything were causing specific problems? What's the history of that discovery?
I love this story. I'm glad you asked that because for me, it started on an airplane flying to Japan. I was going to a meeting. Japan was putting considerable resources into the growing question of chemicals impacting human health. And I was sitting next to a friend who was a chemist at the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, which measures chemicals in people's bodies on an ongoing basis, right? And so we're sitting there, long flight, we're talking, and he says, his name is John Brock, and he said, Shauna, you should look at phthalates. And I'm like, why? I had never heard of phthalates, okay? And this was, I would say probably, I'm guessing now, 98, something like that. Before CDC got their environmental chemistry lab up and running to the point that they could cheaply measure these things in small amounts of sample in lots of people, it really wasn't known what the exposure was to phthalates, to phenols, to parabens, and on and on and on and on, right? And so John did that. He was a chemist. He measured that, and he saw that phthalates were in everybody in the United States at, I mean, almost 99%, regardless of age or sex or race or whatever. So there you have it. It was in everybody. What does it do? Turn over to this other laboratory, National Toxicology Program, and their job was to take these chemicals that were known to be in everybody and say, what do they do?
And then we pump rats full of just an outrageous amount of this chemical and see what it does to the rats, and then scare everybody with the results.
And they do that with animals because that's where you start. So what they showed was that when the mother was exposed to these phthalates, that
exposed to what level?
Male offspring were born not quite right. And the way that they were not quite right, they called the phthalate syndrome. Okay? Now, that doesn't sound remarkable.
The dose makes the poison. How much were they exposing these animals to?
Well, but it's a little more remarkable if you realize that there is no other chemical that has a syndrome named after it.
What?
How do you do that? You know,
There's no other chemical with a syndrome named after it. Listen, I don't know if that's true or false, but that doesn't mean that other chemicals don't cause a problem. And that, like, there's poison. We have things that are, somebody in chat just said lead poisoning. To be fair, the word syndrome isn't in lead poisoning.
Because it's really important, right? And what is the phthalate syndrome? So the phthalate syndrome, they showed in rats, basically they were born with smaller and sometimes misshapen, misplaced genitals.
Okay, so these studies with rats are notoriously bad because what happens is they'll pump these rats full of, like, I don't know, just like amounts of this stuff that are just unreasonable. And so it might have all kind of weird effects, but it's generally not analogous to how much we're being exposed to in our environment. You may be able to, these tests, you can learn a little something about what happens with these things in some animals when the dose is very high. But we don't just stop at rat studies when we try to figure out what's going on with a reaction to a specific chemical. There's this famous study of GMOs. If anybody remembers this, they fed rats a bunch of GMO food, and the rats got tumors. But there were two things wrong with it. One, they were just pumping the rats full of way too much fucking food. And two, these rats were genetically predisposed to having tumors anyway. The study was bullshit, but it was used by anti-GMO activists, right? Because of course it was.
That was the start. Okay.
Pretty bad start.
Pretty bad.
That's rough.
That is a very bad start because, I mean, you got to start somewhere, but how much phthalates were they pumping these rats full of?
I'm curious, out of all things, why do you think that it disrupts proper sexual development and function?
Oh, that's a great question. And it's one I actually can answer because before I give you the answer, I'm going to paint a picture for you. So here's this little
Oh, it'd be great if she actually busted out a canvas and was like, went Bob Ross on us for like half an hour.
rodent or person in utero.
Well, no, but
And
that's
they're-
the rodent or the person in utero. This is just. I haven't seen these studies, but I guarantee you they're pumping these rats full of just an absolute ton of this shit.
very primitive, just maybe a few cells. And at that point, the genital tract is the same in males and females. Okay? It's just a ridge, genital ridge, it's called. Okay. Then at some point, and we know exactly when this is in a rat or a mouse, it's about day 18 of gestation, the testes start to develop and make testosterone. Okay? And that testosterone, in the case of a genetic male, will be sent to the genital ridge and pass the message on that the genital ridge should start developing in a male typical manner. Are you with me?
Yep.
So that means that that little pup will start to develop, all kinds of organs that are male typical and as they grow.
So this is again one of those things where they're trying to sort of pretend that they're speaking to a like a scientifically literate audience or whatever, but this is for a lay audience. And she's blinding people with science in a way here.
Grow. The female, on the other hand, will not be affected because the female is not looking for a testosterone signal, although they have low level of testosterone. Okay. So phthalates interrupt that. Phthalates mess with that. Phthalates lower testosterone.
Do they bind to the receptor of testosterone or
Yes.
do they lower the production?
Probably both.
Probably both, whichever one scares the shit out of your audience.
It's a double whammy.
The result is that the male will be genetic male, but his genitals will be smaller penis, smaller scrotum, misplaced scrotum, often not descending all the way, and some internal changes to the vas deferens and so on. And the endpoint that I particularly got interested in is something that on the street is called the taint. Right? And this is the distance, it's called, the technical term is terrible, anogenital distance.
Pretty
Or
straightforward.
AGD, anus to genitals. Okay.
Very interesting.
Very interesting. Oh my God. Hey, it's tough out there on them streets.
I don't think most people would really have thought about the fact that they are a pretty radical difference in distance between men and women.
Right.
Which, when I heard in the book that this is how they sex difference, between chicks or something?
Yeah. Yeah.
That you can just flip them over and that's how people
Here's a little rat. You hold it up with the tail. You look at the distance. This is a male. This is a female. I can show you pictures of,
That's probably too much. I'll take your word for it.
It's 50 to 100% bigger in male mammals compared to female mammals, except the hyena.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Hyenas,
they're a whole trip unto themselves.
Aren't they?
Yeah.
And elephants are actually much closer male
Well,
and
so
female.
what's interesting on the hyena is that the females are masculinized.
Yes.
Like they will even at times do the dominant thrusting.
Right.
It's a whole
and they are
crazy
alpha.
thing.
I saw this. I went to a hyena colony and I saw a male having his food taken away by an alpha female.
That's interesting.
So it's quite different.
So very fascinating in that I'm assuming the females have an abnormally high testosterone level.
They do, and an abnormally long anogenital distance.
This is so interesting. I mean, this really gets to the chemical processing plant idea. The fact that, in fact, one question I want to ask you is going back. So could I interrupt the normal production of a male in the same way that their sexual
Oh no. This is taint phrenology, everybody. They're doing taint phrenology.
maturation would be disrupted through phthalates if I simply robbed them of testosterone in utero? What's up, guys? It's Tom Bilyeu, and if you're anything like me, you're always looking for ways to level up your mindset, your business, and your life in general. That's exactly what
Oh no, this is a fucking one of them grind set influencer guys. So he like has this has nothing to do with anything. Yeah, this is just some masculinity grift shit. Okay.
I started Impact Theory, a podcast that brings together the world's most successful and inspiring people.
Yeah, but did you measure their taints, sir?
To share their stories and, most importantly, strategies for success. And now it's easier than ever to listen to Impact Theory on Amazon Music. Whether you're on the go or chilling at home, you can simply open up the Amazon Music app and search for Impact Theory with Tom Bilyeu to start listening right away. If you really want to take things to the next level, just ask Alexa. Hey Alexa, play Impact Theory with Tom Bilyeu on Amazon Music.
Now playing Impact Theory with Tom Bilyeu on Amazon Music.
Alexa's like, no, I heard that weird shit you were talking about with the taint, and we're not. Sorry.
Boom. You're instantly plugged into the latest and greatest conversations on mindset, health, finances, and entrepreneurship. Get inspired, get motivated, and be legendary with Impact Theory on Amazon Music. Let's do this. Or do I actually need the presence of phthalates specifically?
No, it's not the phthalate. And I'm thinking when you say, could I rob him of testosterone? I'm not sure how you would.
Tom Bilyeu,
Put an
testosterone thief.
anti-androgen in there. So
Sure, I'm just as a thought experiment.
yeah, no, I'm thinking with you. So something that increases androgen is a pro-androgen, and something that decreases is an anti-androgen.
Yep.
So, and there are many chemicals that do both of these things. And in experimental settings, you can do both. So, and manipulate lots of things through this very potent hormone, testosterone, which is needed for not only the genitals, but the brain, by the way. We can talk about that. So, the masculinization process of a genetic male is under the many things, but playing an important role is the testosterone. Yeah. So you can definitely mess with that. And by the way, the females, well, I haven't told you our results in humans, so we won't go there yet, but I will just tell you, having too much testosterone in the female will cause her to have an abnormally long anogenital distance.
Man, she is really fucking,
So,
she's
all right,
really
this
up on
starts to
this
make
fucking taint
predictions. Let me see if
phrenology.
these predictions are accurate.
Okay.
So if robbing the genetically male,
You know what? Any of the episode names that I'm thinking about this for the podcast are probably going to violate the terms of service of Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
infant in utero of testosterone gives them an abnormally short genital to anal distance and a smaller penis. My gut
Yeah, can somebody in chat look up Shauna Swan? That's Shanna Swan.
instinct then is if I reversed it and I gave a increased amount, a pro-androgen at just the right moment, because I know timing has a lot to do with this, but if I gave that at just the right moment, could I bless that child with a penis he would have to carry around in a wheelbarrow? That's the question for all the dads out there wondering if they can hop up their son.
I am now kind of speaking out of school because I don't know any such
It
experiments.
does make that prediction though. Do you think that's a
I
reasonable
don't think
prediction?
There's also something wrong with this guy's video switcher. Do you see it every time they switch camera angles? Unless they're doing that
I
on
don't
purpose.
think so I think there's probably the female is sensitive to an excess of testosterone because she is not expecting much. So if you then give that female much more testosterone than she's expecting, then she will exhibit a longer AGD. She doesn't have the.
Will she get an enlarged clitoris?
I don't know. But I would, that's a wonderful question.
Interesting.
And,
These
that's something
feel
we could
like
look at.
the right hypotheses
Yeah, no,
for me
it does. It
because
seems like a reasonable hypothesis.
one thing you talk about in the book, and one thing that I think everybody that hears this finds utterly fascinating, is that female is the default gender. So we all start there, and were it not for obviously the presence of the Y chromosome, but then also the increase in testosterone at a certain period of time, it's like we all start female, and you have to be coaxed out of that essentially.
Exactly.
Out of that state. And so if the penile tissue is basically a clitoris fully developed into a masculine form, then one would imagine that if the body's getting a mixed signal of like, okay, you have XX, so this is never going to become a penis, but you have so much testosterone signaling at this point. Now I'm getting confused. I'm extending the AGD. I'm extending that, but then I am also.
What is he just fucking? Is he just like free associating about this? I think he's just like free associating about this.
Over enlarging the clitoris. That makes sense, though I have not looked at any literature.
So here's one problem, Tom. The examination of the male is much simpler than the female because the organs are external.
Mm-hmm.
There's not much external clitoris. There's a lot internal, right?
Which you just shocked a lot of people. The first time I saw, I don't know if it was a drawing or whatever, of how far the clitoris goes, like shocking. Shocking, I say.
Right. So
I'm not going to, everybody else can make whatever joke. Make, you know.
To measure how large to measure it at all, and let alone whether it depends on the presence of an androgen or, it would take a very big effort. I mean, you would have to have a scan.
But couldn't you just do the part that's visible on the outside? I mean, that seems
I'm not sure what that reflects. I'm not sure how much that reflects.
Interesting.
I don't know. It's not my field, but it's a great hypothesis. So I'd like to talk about this AGD and this phthalate syndrome in humans, if I can.
Please.
To pivot to that. Okay. So when I heard this from John Brock, I thought, okay, interesting. There's an exposure. What is it doing in humans, right? There's a human exposure. What is it doing? And then I thought, well, how would we even ask the question? And you're smart. You think, well, how would you answer that? What would you think about doing?
About figuring out what's causing the change in length?
Oh, back before that.
Oh my God. Oh God, I'm so uncomfortable. I'm so uncomfortable right now. Everybody hold hands. This is uncomfortable.
The question is, I think, do humans have a phthalate syndrome?
I see.
Because that was unknown. It was never heard of.
You would have to back into it with if you understand the mechanism of action, this is why I was saying, does it block the receptors or does it reduce the amount of androgen being produced? That would be one way that you could get into that. And then the other would be, is there, does it do something proactively? Is there biomimicry here? Does it look like something else that's causing the body to do something extra or to not do something?
Right.
That would be where I would start in terms of whether that's tied exactly to phthalates. Obviously, you're going to have to run experimentation, but you start injecting or lacing the food of rats or whatever with it.
What about humans?
Oh, he's probably all for human experimentation.
You'd be pretty gnarly if you did that, but you could certainly measure who are the people that have phthalates in their system and what do they have common. Well, I think I'm cheating because I've heard you say that it's measurable in the urine. So I would take urine samples.
Whose urine sample?
Men and women? I would start with women. If I hadn't read your book, I would never even think.
To grill you.
No, this is actually really interesting.
Yeah.
So had I not,
why is she asking this fucking grind set bro how he would design an experiment about this when this is her field of expertise?
Think about men, so I would have gone straight to women.
Right. So we're talking about a process that takes place during pregnancy.
Yep.
So if you want to know whether there's phthalates swimming around in there, you got to ask that question of pregnant women's urine, right? And you're right. Urine is the place to look. That's because it's what we call non-persistent. It's water soluble. There are other bad chemicals that are fats in fat and blood and so on. But this goes into urine pretty quickly, 4 hours on average.
Thank God.
Thank God.
But that's crazy then for people that have elevated levels. You are constantly introducing it to your system.
Absolutely.
Whoa.
In and out at a pretty steady rate. So
Well, it sounds like your body's doing what it's supposed to do here. I'm no expert, but if you're peeing that shit out, if you're peeing it out in 4 hours, it sounds like your body's doing a pretty good job of getting rid of it.
And that, by the way, is everybody. In order to look at this, I was thinking, okay, I'd want to know this. I want to have phthalate levels in pregnant women. Okay, what do I need for that? I need the urine from pregnant women. Where do I get that? Well, I was very lucky, foresighted, I don't know, that
We'll go with foresighted.
in a prior study, which we could talk about because it's related to sperm count, I stored urine of pregnant women.
Whoa.
I just happened to have a freezer full of the urine from
As you
pregnant
do.
women. And actually, many labs do have that because now we know how valuable it is.
Interesting.
Because
That's
if you
smart.
ever want to say, was the fetus exposed to X, Y, and Z, pull it out of the freezer and measure it.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that was good. I had that side of it. Then the other side is,
Chat's asking about the Christopher Key guy. A guy who drank his own pee, actually injected his own pee also drank it on the Stu Peters show. Yeah, I wonder what Chris Key thinks about all this. That's a good fucking question.
what does the phthalate syndrome look like in a human? Nobody had ever asked that question. Actually, that's not quite true. One study did ask that question, but not related to a prenatal exposure. So I learned that later. So I came along and I thought, okay, we want to see if what's happening in animals is happening in humans. It's an interesting thought experiment, how would you do that? I said, well, we have to measure the babies, right? Then I had to find the babies that were born to those women whose urine I had stored.
Whoa.
Hello, ma'am. I'm a world-renowned taint phrenologist, and what I need to know is how big is your son's dick? Oh, no.
And then I had to think about, well, what will I measure? Because while the AGD had been measured in rats for a very long time, I think from 19...
Oh, no.
And used as
Shocking.
part of the national toxicology.
Remember when you gave me your pee? Well, I'm here to measure your child's taint, actually. No, nothing weird about it, I promise. It's for science.
Program testing for reproductive toxin since about 1950. Nobody had done this. So I love problems like this. I love these. So I got together with my colleagues and I said, well, what should we look for? What is the analog in humans of the phthalate syndrome in rats? Okay, and some of them were straightforward. So penile size. That's pretty straightforward. Turns out penile length is quite different, difficult to measure. Width is relatively easy.
Anybody that's just listening right now will not have realized I just made a weird face. How is length hard to measure?
Because it's changeable.
Meaning you can't get them erect?
You can.
Got it. Okay.
Right.
Understood.
But
Oh. Yeah, now I'm incredibly uncomfortable.
I was like, let me tell you, it's measurable.
Right? But width is a fixed, you can measure pretty reliably. So we could do that.
No, wait, for the same reason, that seems like it should be hard to measure.
It's much less changeable.
What?
Yeah, the width is much
From
less.
erect to limp? That seems shocking. You're saying that most people are roughly the same width when
there's much less
unaroused.
difference in the width than the length. Let's
That
put
is
it like
fascinating.
that. Right.
Okay.
So that's what we could do. So So we actually did measure length also, and many studies do measure length. There's been a recent study on penile length that just came out. We can talk about it if you want, but
Tell me more.
but
The study is that everyone lies about it.
yeah. So we had that. Descent of the testicles is measurable, a little difficult to quantify, and because sometimes they hide in the abdomen, and you have to bring them down and try to see
Terror
how far.
or really cold weather,
Yeah,
all gone.
right.
This is making my testicles hide in my abdomen. I don't know about you guys.
So we decided that would be an interesting endpoint. But the key thing was AGD, anus genital distance. How do we do that in humans? I mean, think about it. How would you, so now that we've done it for years and it's now used internationally, we have protocols and they're all written out and straightforward to do it. But at the time when we were starting this, we were kind of making it up as we went along. And I had worked with some wonderful clinicians, pediatricians and others who,
So just so we're clear here, we went from fertility to birth rate to now just like fucking dick phrenology.
designed this exam and got measures of AGD. Just think about for this room. What is AGD? Anus to the genitals. Where in the genitals?
That's my exact question to you, because whether, like, if I were warm or cold, depending on where you measure that from, it would be different.
Actually, not so much. What really makes a difference is the landmark. So do you start at the anus? That's easy.
I never thought I'd be having this conversation, by the way. This is fascinating.
I never thought we'd be watching this conversation. This is not fascinating.
But where do you end? What is the genital side of this?
That's
Anus
what I'm saying. Like
right?
the-
Okay. So it turned out we ended up doing two. And one was the scrotal and one was the penile.
Scrotal connection?
Yeah. That's the question.
Okay,
Where?
because that,
Okay.
like, if you're talking scrotal connection, that's not going anywhere. But warm to cold, I assure you, this N of one, they would be very different distances.
That's interesting because we never consider temperature.
What?
Never.
Was this a panel of women only doing these measurements?
No.
Because a guy would instantly be like, "Hey,
Well,
I'm
these
gonna
are
need you to warm it up
babies.
in here."
These are babies in a hospital.
Okay, that's
that we're measuring.
very different.
Yeah.
Very different.
Yeah.
Does that count for adults? We don't do measurements on adults.
We do adults. But let
Okay.
me finish the babies.
All right.
So the question is, where is the end of that measurement? So you have a calipers. That's what
Yep.
you use. You use it.
Oh, you use calipers. You don't fucking say. I can't believe this. We actually got the word calipers in this. Actually, I can totally believe that.
Calipers. You open the calipers. One end you put on the. I should have brought my doll. I have a doll to demonstrate this.
Oh no, I'm so glad you didn't bring the doll. I'm so glad you didn't bring the doll. Is everybody? Even if you're listening to this, like on a podcast, you're probably also glad that she didn't bring the doll.
That is amazing. I need to know how that story went. I'm going to need you to make me a doll, but I have
Oh.
specific requirements.
Do not give this man whatever doll this is.
And then the other side, I said scrotal. So let's talk about that. So it turns out that the underside of the scrotum is striated. You know that the tissue is different. Okay.
Oh, very intimately, yes.
So there's a point at which that tissue changes from smooth to striated.
Hmm.
That's the point you want to go to.
Hmm.
Okay?
Interesting.
Okay, so wouldn't you just measure from your abdomen, from the other side, from the top side, from like? Anyway, I'm not getting into it. This is that if I was going to do such a thing, I would just measure from the top. Put a ruler. Never mind. Forget it. I'm not. Forget I said that. Please stay.
Saying okay,
With your
got
other
you.
side of your caliper. Alternatively, you can go all the way up to the insertion of the penis. That's the anterior, the part closest to your
Right,
head. Where does it
yeah.
enter your body? That's not so clear cut.
Hmm.
And we had a lot of discussion about, do we press down? How hard do we press down? You understand?
Yeah. What?
It's
Yeah,
just like,
yeah,
Why do you
yeah.
press
if you're
down?
going to measure something in a population, you have to really be clear about how to do it
Fair.
repeatedly And so we did that. We piloted that over and over and over again with different people and until we got a protocol that was repeatable by multiple observers multiple times. Right? I'm sure this is more about AGD than anyone wanted to know. But these are published methods.
Yeah.
And by the way, one of the things that matters is where is the kid's legs?
Huh?
When you're doing this. So it turns out that if the legs are pulled back, the mother, suppose I put a baby on my lap, I take the knees, I put it back up against their shoulder.
Isn't that illegal? Whatever she's describing.
Extended, right? And you'll get a longer AGD.
Misleadingly longer AGD,
right,
I assume. Yeah.
Right. So you have to make sure you pull the same amount for everybody. It's tricky.
We end up getting the measurement.
You end up getting the measurement.
So the key insight is, hey, this thing that we've been using for a long time in rats, we can now do this in humans as well.
Right. Good. So we've duplicated the whole exam of the rat, if you will, in human infants. And then what did we find? So send the urine to the CDC. CDC tells us how many phthalates, which phthalates are in there, how much are in there. And then we have this database with now all these measurements. And so,
but wait a minute, wait. I see. Okay, first of all, let's forget about the baby folding part on all of that. If they have one urine sample from someone, that's just a snapshot, right? That's like one time. That is not going to be representative of any other part of the pregnancy except for the one time they have the sample. So you can't really even tell anything from that.
It's now a question of asking these two databases, the phthalate database, the exam database, do they match up in some way? And the answer was yes, that when there were more phthalates, particularly 3 most anti-androgenic phthalates, when they were higher in the mother, the male had a pattern which was very similar to the rats. So they had shorter anogenital distance, they had smaller penile size, they had less descent of the testes. Those were the 3 main endpoints that we had.
Okay, so we now know that this syndrome does exist in humans. We can measure it. The first thing people are going to ask is, where am I getting these things? And so you did a home walkthrough with people.
No, that's not my question. My question is, how are you going to determine anything from a single sample? Because it's a fucking snapshot.
Give us some of the most common places. Is it plastic bottles? Is it makeup? Like, what are the places that people are, because we're having to replenish it, which means that I could change my behavior and then over some period of time, it should go away. So where are we replenishing our phthalate stores?
So food, I would say, is the major source.
So that's getting tainted. So milk.
Oh, tainted, you say?
Anytime it's going through soft plastic, we're going to be in trouble.
If I don't call this episode Tainted Baby, then everybody can just stop watching the Intellectual Dollar Tree.
So food, packaging. Also
correct.
processing, I imagine there's going to be a lot of times.
Yes. And storage, transport, cooking. So if you think about this little tomato, pluck it here on the farm, what does it go through before you put it on your plate? Farm to fork. All along that way.
Am I looking out just for soft plastic, or are there other places that I'm getting these?
There are other places.
Lovely.
So you can get it in your liquids. You can get it.
But don't my liquids have to come into contact with some sort of plastic?
Right. Okay, let's leave the soft plastic out. Although the soft plastic can be in many forms. For example, in your shower curtain, a rubber ducky, and so on and so forth. So it doesn't just have to be food. I would say the foodborne exposure.
The rubber ducky actually made Ernie a bottom.
Are going to be primarily through soft plastics. Their plasticizer function. Right?
So every time I see soft plastic, I need to immediately go, this is giving me phthalates. Because
yes
it can
and
be
no.
absorbed
Yes
through the
and no.
skin.
Yes or no? So, there's a recycling code on the bottle.
Yes.
Bottom. Okay. So if you look at that, you'll see numbers from 1 to 7.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I used to say, and I'll still say with reservation, that there's a little poem. It goes like this: 5, 4, 1, and 2. All the rest are bad for you.
Nice.
Easy, right? But let's look at 6. 6 could be BPA, which we haven't talked about, but we should, which is something that makes plastic hard instead of soft, which is estrogenic instead of anti-androgenic, kind of a bad cousin, of the evil twin. But 6 could also be potatoes.
Wait, what?
Because it's the other category. So plastics are made from, there are bioplastics.
I did not know that. I thought they were all coming from petroleum.
No, they're not. There are alternatives now. Most are coming from petroleum.
And we still get phthalates from potatoes?
No, we get plastics from potatoes.
Whoa. Okay, you're rocking my world here.
Okay.
So there is a way to process.
There is something called bioplastic. So instead of plastic, and you're correct, most plastic is made from biofuels, byproducts of petroleum production, right? But as we became aware that this was a bad thing for us to be experiencing in our body, they sought out other alternatives. Now, one of them is potatoes. The problem is that the carbon footprint of growing those potatoes is pretty high. So what chemists are looking for now is an alternative that will perform the function of plastics without the dangers of plastics. Okay, and I fully believe that is possible. But it takes a lot of people willing to put the investment in, take the risk, retool. You can imagine, know about business and what's involved in changing a process like that. It's huge. It's phenomenal. And in the meantime, people want these products. Now, I don't think people really would be unhappy if their plastic bottle or container and so on was made from a bioplastic instead of a petrochemical plastic. People are not seeking that out. They want the container. So I think you can satisfy people's needs and demands through safer plastics, but that's slow and expensive to bring on board. Okay. So you asked me, is it just soft plastic? So let's leave that aside for a minute and go to another route of exposure. And another major route of exposure is any personal care products.
What?
That can be another route of exposure. And another major route of exposure is any personal care products.
Personal care products.
That can be something you put on your skin. And why would that contain phthalates? It's because the phthalates help absorption. So they're kind of magical in a way. They do all these things, right? And for that reason, they're added to pesticides too, because they help the pesticide go up the plant and stay in the leaves and so on. So absorption is an important function, softening, absorption. They also, and this is amazing that they can do all these things, they also hold scent, fragrance, and color. And so it's not a big leap to think about why they're used in cosmetics. And while they're used in fragrance products like nice smelling laundry soap and air fresheners you plug in and that little pine cone you hang in your car, they're all emitting these chemicals.
It's crazy. It's crazy. So this is coming out in the things we eat. It's coming out in the things we drink, and it's coming out even in the air we breathe. Okay, so that brings us back. I've heard you say some of these things, so I can lead the witness a little bit here, but it's pretty terrifying. So and maybe now is the time that we get back into the are we or are we not chemical processing plants only. Because when I hear this, I think, well, the only way forward then, if it's in what we eat, drink, and breathe, you have to stop using these chemicals. There's no other way. Like if you keep emitting all of these, you're going to have the problem. The fertility rates are declining. The rate at which they're declining is speeding up. It's doubled in like the last 20 years. I think it was from 2012 to now. Sperm count. Sorry. Thank you. In fact, you were very clear. Sperm count has the rate at which it's declining is very high. And at the beginning, you said that we're still holding steady at a 1% rate. And then I said, well, doesn't it predict that that's going to go higher? And then later, you said that our sperm count has dropped by 50% and fertility rate has dropped by almost the exact same amount. Is that a coincidence? Which then I was thinking in my head, that's exactly what I'm saying. Like if the rate of sperm count is dropping at an ever increasing rate and the rate at which it's declining is speeding up, I think that ultimately is going to have to echo back to the overall fertility rate, or there's something. I guess the only thing is if they're artificially, there's an acronym for this, but artificially assisted fertility, whatever that is.
ART.
ART.
Mm-hmm.
So is that why we have a break between the exact drop in?
I think so. So assisted ART, which is assisted reproductive technology, refers to all of the different ways that medicine can help you get pregnant, from hormones to actually, putting a sperm inside an egg and putting it in the body. And that has been increasing rapidly, the use of ART and the number of...
the increase in that might be that the technology is better and more people can use it. It might be aging population and older people wanting to have kids, like people wanting to have kids in an older age, because sometimes your body just isn't going to be capable of having kids as you age, but you want to have them anyway. The increase of the use of this isn't necessarily directly tied to this, what they are saying is a dramatic decrease in sperm count. There's any number of reasons that an elective procedure or whatever might increase in use.
Options has increased. The most dramatic is in Israel, because in Israel, the government pays for up to 2 live births via assisted reproduction.
Whoa.
And, this is very expensive.
Where's their birth rate at?
It's one of the few that has not dropped.
I mean, it sounds like they're going pretty hard to make sure it doesn't.
Yeah, I want to say 3.3, but don't hold me to that, because it's so that's interesting, but for most people, assisted reproduction is something they want to avoid if at all possible. It's difficult, it can be painful, it can be definitely expensive, anxiety producing, interfering with the mental health of the couple, I would say, putting a great strain on the marriage, and so on and so forth. Nevertheless,
but the great strain on the marriage probably isn't a direct result of the treatment. The strain on the marriage might be because they're both frustrated because they want kids and they can't have kids, or they're having a hard time having kids. I don't think it has anything to do with the treatment. I bet the treatment, if it works, actually reduces the stress on the marriage. I don't have any info on that, but I would assume that if the treatment worked and there was stress on the marriage because they were having a hard time having a kid, that would reduce the stress on the marriage.
Increasing. The number of children born by assisted reproduction is increasing. And the available technologies for this are also increasing. And I think we're going to have more and more options for doing this. But it's not helping the underlying biology. So let me just say, if a couple is infertile, if a man is infertile, more evidence on men, or his sperm count is low, his health is impacted.
So this brings up something that you and I were talking about before we started rolling. And I said, well, I'm going to restate this once we're back on. So I said that my mom smoked through her entire pregnancy with me. And the first words out of your mouth were, have you had your sperm checked? And I was like, nope. My whole life I've been paranoid about getting someone pregnant. I've never even thought about it. And then you said, I don't want to scare you, but...
Men with low sperm count and men who could not conceive a pregnancy, which is clearly related, will die younger.
What?
Have a shorter life expectancy.
And can you ballpark me on how much? I need to know how paranoid I need to be here.
I would say that's a number that's not real tightly understood. There's a couple of papers.
There's just a couple papers, then we don't know, actually.
Say we're looking at a couple of years, but that's a guess. Don't hold me to that. But I can tell you.
Wait a minute. If there's only a couple papers and the delta is only like a couple years in a couple of papers, then the answer is, I don't know.
Might be affected, which is heart disease, diabetes.
Why?
We'll come back to that. Diabetes and reproductive cancers.
Oof.
Okay. And why is that? So then we have to go back and think about this. Let's just think.
Wait a minute. No. Okay. So this started with a mother who smokes during pregnancy. And I would think that there are other reasons for health factors there. A mother who smokes during pregnancy against the best advice of medical professionals might also be inclined to ignore other advice from medical professionals after their child is born. I'm not a genius. I mean, I might be. Who knows? Everybody's a genius. But you would think that that it would imply other things, that it isn't just the genetics of the smoking during pregnancy, which is bad, but that there would be other like similar situations that might come up after the child's born.
Again, the phthalates are lowering.
Or the secondhand smoke. It's not like they're going to quit as soon as the kid's born if they didn't quit during pregnancy.
Testosterone, androgens. And then you might ask, okay, what else in the body depends on adequate androgen, right? And the first thing that jumps out is the brain. And we can talk about that if you want. But every system in the body requires a healthy balance of these hormones. So I'm not a cardiologist and I can't speak to the hormonal influences on cardiac function and cardiac disease, but I know certainly that they affect metabolic function. And that's related to the risk of diabetes and so on. So if you're disturbing the system in very early development, when there's just a few cells, and they're rapidly dividing, they're getting these messages, their normal, development is altered by the alteration of these hormones. And that is going to be a systemic-wide alteration. So it's not surprising to me at all. It's not that your sperm count is low and then you have more X, Y, and Z disease. It's that from the get-go, you had an interruption of normal development, which had impacts on your entire body. The sperm count is a little window into that because one of the things, it's certainly not the only thing, but one of the things that sperm count indicates is that there was an alteration in hormonal function and that it will affect, your later health. So I recommend to men, but men know too little about their reproductive health anyway. Women go to the OB/GYN every year, right? They get a pap smear, they get checked, everything gets checked, their breasts get checked, which is great. And men, not so much, right?
You don't get your reproductive. You get the boys out and they give them a juggle, but I'm certainly not making a sperm deposit. So, that's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Dear.
So I'm grappling emotionally with the fact that this is a leading indicator of a potential problem. I need to get it checked.
The other thing about the male
Where do you go to get it checked though?
Oh, yeah.
Like my doctor's never said, hey, would you like to drop one off?
You can say to your doctor, I want to get my sperm count tested.
Got it.
There are a couple of companies that have come out since the book, actually. But one is called Fellow, one is called Legacy. There are probably other ones. And they've made it very easy, because it used to be that to get your sperm count checked, you had to go into a clinic and you had to go through the somewhat uncomfortable process of producing a sample in a bathroom.
I'm sorry. I would have that. Not uncomfortable for me. I'd be fine with that. They'd be like, oh, go jack off in a cup in the bathroom. I'd be like, got it. I'll be back in 2 minutes.
All. But these companies allow you to do this at home and send the kit in, and they're reliable, and they will send you back your sperm count. If you want, I can give you. I don't want to promote any one company, but you and I can have a little conversation.
Yeah.
about
Look,
that.
if you know the place to go, I'm happy to hear about it.
And while I'm at it, I should say it's
like 23andMe, but for your sperm.
Have your urine tested for lots of phthalates and phenols and so on.
Interesting.
Anybody
that seems really important,
right? And a company that does that is called Million Marker. And again, there are other ones. And I suspect that companies of these kinds are going to be increasing as we get more and more concerned, and technology steps in and says, okay, we can help you learn about your body in a way that may protect your health. So I think those are good things.
Okay. So if I wanted to get this back on track, so it sounds like I need to be looking at, I need to be taking an endocrine approach to this. I need to figure out what my testosterone levels are.
He's like, I need to get my fucking jizz on the grind set.
Check my sperm count, which I assume we're looking at amount, motility. Is there anything else? Morphology,
shape.
What it's, okay. Yeah. Amazing. And let's say that one or all of those come back problematic. Is the next step just like, obviously, where is your phthalate exposure coming from? Reduce that, or like, do you have a protocol that you put people through to
protocol
get back on track?
Oh, great. She's fucking, if she's going to fucking be like colloidal silver or some shit, we're done here. Right.
We work with people that have educational programs to try to counsel people on how to, detox their house, if you will, and their lives. But
what does your house look like? Like, do you have blankets? So I went on a.
What does your house look like? Do you have blankets?
But they were like, yo, you're taking a lot of toxins through more things than you can imagine, like blankets and stuff. And I was like, blankets? They're like, yeah, because of all the the flame retardant
PFAS,
stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, oh, whoa. And he's like, oh, but don't worry. Like, you can get these blankets that are like all natural and you don't have to worry. And so I got an all natural blanket. And I was like, oh, it looks amazing. And it arrived, and it might as well be burlap. Like, it is not comfortable.
Oh,
so
sorry.
Are there comfy, like, do you have sandpaper for sheets at your house?
No,
and you brush your teeth with baking soda?
No.
Like, what does your house look like?
I'm not a fanatic. I try to.
Do you measure your phthalate levels?
I have, but not recently. I don't like persist.
I thought he was going to ask a completely different question, if I'm being completely honest.
Measure them. And by the way, the effect of these chemicals on adults and is not really well studied. Most of what we know is effects on the fetus and the young child.
What's your hypothesis, though?
I think it matters less. So the critical periods are the periods of rapid cell division. So in utero, obviously, that's number one. And early life, infancy, and puberty, and probably menopause. But Tom, these studies cost, every one of these human studies costs $5 million.
Ooh.
He just wrote it down. He's like $5 million.
5 years. That's just to link one class of chemicals, usually, to one set of outcomes. So you see, it's
not to link it. That's the other thing, is the study doesn't necessarily link it. The study study suggests that they're correlated. At best, a single study will suggest that they're correlated.
My studies, by the way, we didn't really finish that story about the phthalate syndrome in humans, but I did find that in that study that we had the phthalate syndrome. But then, as all scientists, I had to replicate that. And then I had to design a study specifically on that question. See, the first study wasn't designed on the question. We had some stored urine, we brought back the babies, we put them together. Great, we found this finding.
Put the babies in the urine together?
Right. And you design a study specifically to ask that question. That's a new grant. Have to go through grant review. Terrible process, by the way.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't give a grant for this. I'd be like, you want to do Taint Phrenology? Well, like, go look for your money somewhere else.
Then if you're lucky, you'll get the grant. And then you have to find the women who are pregnant. You have to bring them in. You have to say, will you be in the study? Will you give us your urine? Will you let us measure your baby? And then
the answer is probably no.
Now we know that early pregnancy is most important. And we measured all the babies at birth and so on and so forth. So it was much, much more precise study. And we found
What is he writing?
So that plus the animal studies, plus studies that have been done by many other people now on this, lead me to say, and I don't use the word cause very much, that phthalates cause the phthalate syndrome in humans.
And if you had to give me in a sentence, what is the phthalate syndrome in humans?
The phthalate syndrome in humans is a incomplete masculinization of the male genital tract.
You can reboot your life, your health, even...
Nope, that's fucking this guy's commercial. We're done. I can't fucking listen to a second more of this fucking creepy shit. I thought this was going to be one thing and it was something else. I was not ready for what that was. In a way, I'm glad I did this alone. And in another way, I wish HK would have actually been here in studio with me to do this, because it would have been something. It would have been something. Yeah, I don't really have any finishing thoughts. I mostly I need a drink out of a non-plastic cup. My vodka's not in a plastic bottle. There's no phthalates in my vodka, right? Yeah, usually like I have something to say at the end of these, but I just feel very uncomfortable. This has been the Intellectual Dollar Tree. You can find this podcast on your favorite podcatchers, and I don't know if you've made it this far. You're a fucking weirdo. Give me money on Patreon, patreon.com/Echoplex. This is Boomers by Periscope. And when we come back, whatever we watch after this is going to fucking feel like a goddamn deliverance. I'm going to change the color of the lights, change the content of my beverage, and hopefully sort of change our mindset and our grind set for the next segment of the show. I'll see everybody in red light.